The wind howled through the tall pines that bordered the house, a noise that almost masked the creak of the front door swinging on its rusty hinges. Sam stood at the entrance, clutching the keys to the old property he had inherited from his late aunt. It was a Victorian house, 3 stories high, with an eerie presence that loomed over the landscape. He had heard stories, whispers about the house, but he didn't believe in ghosts until that night. It was already dusk when Sam finally stepped inside. The scent of damp wood and dust hit him, and the dim light from his phone flickered as he tried to find the switch. The walls, once a pale blue, were now a dirty gray. Family portraits hung for oh you said. Right, interesting story, ChatGPT said. ChatGPT title. The Whispering Walls. Jenny had always wanted her own place. So when she found a house in the countryside for half the price it should have been, she didn't hesitate. A cozy, old stone cottage with ivy crawling up the sides, nestled in a quiet, forested area. It seemed like a dream. On the first night, after moving in, she heard faint sounds. It was subtle at first, like wind sneaking through the cracks in the walls. As she unpacked, the noise grew louder, murmurs, indistinct whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It's an old house, Jenny told herself. Old houses creak. But by the second night, the whispers had turned into soft voices. They were low and constant, so subtle it felt as if they were just beyond her reach. She pressed her ear against the wall, trying to make sense of them. The words were unclear, but one thing was certain, it wasn't just the house settling. On the third night, Jenny couldn't sleep. The whispers had become louder, almost like a conversation happening all around her. It didn't make sense, there was no one else in the house. The voices seemed to be coming from every corner of the room, surrounding her like an invisible crowd. Her heart pounded in her chest as she sat up, trying to catch a familiar word or phrase. Suddenly, there was silence. The air in the room felt heavy, as if the house was holding its breath. Then, from the darkness, she heard it, a voice, clear and sharp, right beside her bed. "We see you." Jenny jumped out of bed, her pulse racing. She fumbled for the lamp, but the light wouldn't turn on. Panic clawed at her chest as she felt her way through the dark, reaching for the door. The whispering began again, louder this time, filling the room with unintelligible words, like 1,000 voices trying to speak at once. She ran out of the bedroom, down the hallway, and into the living room. But the voices followed. It felt as though the very walls were alive, their stone surfaces vibrating with every whisper. The house seemed to pulse with life, a dark presence that had been waiting for her. As Jenny stumbled to the front door, her hand touched the cold brass knob, but it wouldn't turn. It was locked, bolted from the inside. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening now. Then, she heard the voice again, closer this time. "Stay." With a rush of adrenaline, Jenny yanked at the door, throwing her body against it, desperate to escape. The wood groaned under the force of her push, but it wouldn't give. Behind her, the whispers stopped once more, replaced by a new sound, footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the hallway. Jenny's hands shook as she turned around. The living room was dark, but she could see the faint outline of something moving in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the dim moonlight filtering through the window. A figure stood at the edge of the room, watching her. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure didn't answer. It just stood there, unmoving, as the whispers started again, now coming from within the very walls around her. With a final desperate shove, the door flew open, and Jenny ran out into the night, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't stop until she reached her car, fumbling with the keys and speeding away from the house. As she looked in the rearview mirror, the cottage seemed to watch her, its dark windows like hollow eyes in the night. She never went back. The next morning, the realtor called her. "I heard you left in quite a hurry," the woman said, a strange tone in her voice. Jenny swallowed hard, still shaken. "That house. There's something wrong with it. The walls," they were whispering. The realtor's voice was quiet for a moment, then she spoke, almost apologetically. "I was going to tell you, but I didn't want to scare you off. The house, it's old. Very old. And the people who've lived there before, they never left. Jenny felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? They say the house keeps them, the realtor said softly. The walls, they have stories of their own. Jenny hung up the phone, her hand shaking. She never spoke of the house again, but sometimes, in the quiet of the night, she could still hear the faintest whispering, as if the house hadn't quite let her go.